the channel. If you're new here, I'm Van, and I hope you're feeling very nostalgic today because I'm going to be chatting about early 2000s stuff while you watch me draw a bunch of Y2K inspired illustrations. So slap on some frosted lipstick because things are about to get pretty crunk. And for the record, that was probably the one and only time I've ever said the word crunk. I don't think anybody really said that, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think one of the things that is absolutely boggling my mind right now is the revival of the Y2K aesthetic. And as a grizzled millennial, it warms my heart to see like the younger generations become kind of interested in this era in like all its shiny chrome glory. So I thought it would be really fun to do some early 2000s inspired illustrations while I test out some new markers and paper that I recently purchased. So the general idea was to do a lot of iconic objects from the 2000s. I did like a flip phone and a CD player, basically the stuff you'd find in a teenage girl's backpack from this era. I had so much fun researching ideas on Pinterest for this. I'm very nostalgic, so revisiting the things I used to have as a teenager never fails to crack me up because, let's face it, the early 2000s was a ridiculous time. You just had to be there. But for this drawing, I wanted to do something a little different and do a base color of bright pink for all the different pieces so that they look a little more cohesive together. I've seen other artists do this online and I've never done it before, so I was really excited to try it. I'm just using like an alcohol marker for this part. This was the first time I've ever used this paper as well. It's like a marker paper that I picked up from a local art supply store, and it handled pretty well. I honestly love this technique. You'll see at the end, I just really like how the bright pink kind of shines through when you put the layers on top. So this was probably my favorite thing from this particular session. I was really excited to put the acrylic markers on top just to see how it would react with the pink underneath, as well as using like colored pencil for the detail work. But yeah, this was really fun. This is technically my second time using these acrylic markers. The first time was in my last video where I painted a bunch of rocks. I didn't really know how they would handle on this new paper, so I did make a lot of mistakes on this piece, but I still really loved the process. I was just so in the zone. I was like locked in. I kind of forgot I was filming for a majority of this illustration, which honestly is like a great feeling, to be totally lost in a drawing. It's been a while, like since I've hit that kind of creative groove. But yeah, I loved how the acrylic markers layered really well on top of each other. My only gripe is that I really struggled to get the colored pencil to look good on this marker paper. I'm using a Faber Castel pencil and a Prismacolor pencil, and like the paper itself is just so smooth with almost like a plastic coating. And so the markers really glide on top, but it's just so horrible for colored pencils because there's no tooth to the paper. So I may have to test out like other supplies for line art if I'm using this paper, but I think that was the only thing I was having major troubles with. So yeah, my line art isn't great on this, but I made it work as best I could. So in the early 2000s, I was entering high school, and I vividly remember every girl being obsessed with the lip gloss. I think if you looked in my purse, I had at least like 3 tubes of shimmery lip gloss. And the funny thing about it is that it looked cute for like 10 minutes, and then you'd end up licking it off pretty quickly after that because they'd flavor the lip gloss like bubblegum or Starburst. And I think one of my friends was like legitimately addicted to lip smackers because I always saw her like feverishly reapplying her lip gloss like every 30 minutes. She had like all the ones that were flavored like soda. So she'd like walk around smelling like Dr. Pepper or Sprite. Every teenage girl probably smelled like fake candy and soda during this time. I don't know if that's like still popular now, but yeah, I just remember that it was very important that you had really like shiny frosty lips, like the shinier the better, and it doesn't matter that your hair or lint would get stuck to your lips. As long as your lips resembled a freshly glazed donut, you're on the right track to being cool. So here I'm working on the illustration of an Apple iPod. I wish I still had my iPod. I loved that thing. It was red. My ex-boyfriend from college had bought it for me, and it was like the coolest, shiniest little thing. And I loaded it with so much pirated music from like Napster and LimeWire. I'm not proud to admit that I don't think I bought a single song during this time. I was broke, okay? I would spend all night like downloading music from random people online, just tons of J-rock and J-pop because that's what all my friends were listening to at the time. And it was really hard to like find that music anywhere else. But yeah, I just loved that iPod so much. I was just amazed at how many songs and like playlists I could stuff onto that device. And obviously this was before smartphones, so I thought that an iPod was like the pinnacle of technology at the time. And then like when they first announced the iPhone, I was just like not impressed. Like, why would I need that? I'm doing, just fine with my iPod and my flip phone. So now I'm working on the digital camera piece. I love how this camera turned out. I used to have one exactly like this. It was also in like a shade of blue. I think I had read an article back in like maybe 2021 about how Gen Z is obsessed with collecting 20-year-old digital cameras. And it was maybe the first time I had even noticed that there was a Y2K revival even happening. But the article was super interesting because for me, I remember how crappy these old cameras were. They were kind of grainy and like the exposure wasn't great. So I was kind of confused why people would want these cameras again. And the article made an interesting argument that people are just looking for like meaning in their lives, like away from their smartphones. And they're not looking for perfect photos, they're looking for authenticity and like a sense of being in the present, which is something that a smartphone camera obviously does not provide. And I just thought that was so cool. It's like an interesting way to fight back against our modern technology, which is clearly trying to take over our lives and our attention spans. I do wonder if CD players will come back in the same way. I have so many fond memories of my old Sony Vaio CD player. That thing took such a beating. I probably dropped it like 10 times and it somehow still played music. I don't think I could have survived high school and college without that thing. I did make a list of like my top albums that I listened to during this era. I didn't include like any boy bands and stuff though, because I don't think I ever bought an NSYNC CD or like a Backstreet Boys CD. I did listen to them, but they were kind of like, they're hard to ignore. They were always on the radio, so I never felt the need to buy their albums. But I did make a list of like the albums that were on constant rotation in my CD player. The first album is the TLC Fan Mail album. You have to watch the music videos from this album because I consider it to be like peak Y2K. Everything was just like so shiny and chrome, and it had no scrubs on it, which is like peak early 2000s, I think. It's such a jam. But yeah, that was my first favorite album. The second one is Fiona Apple, Win the Pawn. I still listen to this album from time to time. It's so good. It's really like kind of moody. I was kind of a moody kid during this time, but I was obsessed with Fiona Apple during the 90s. And I did eventually see her in concert in 2008, and that was amazing. The third album that I have on my list is Coldplay Parachutes. I don't really listen to Coldplay anymore, but that first album I consider very important because it got me interested in British rock bands. I was like maybe 5 years late on the British wave that happened in the mid-90s, so I listened to like a lot of Oasis and Blur during this time, but that does lead me to my next album, or my next band on my list, which is Radiohead with their Kid A album. This one's a little bit funny because it was considered pretty experimental at the time, and I still remember sitting down at like a Borders music section listening to like the sample clips of Kid A when it first came out and thinking it was the most bizarre thing I'd ever heard. I hadn't listened to like any Radiohead until that moment, but I've been a fan ever since, and I make it a point to revisit their albums like every year. There's just something about Kid A that captures that early internet vibe for me. I don't know why. It just reminds me of getting on the internet and like talking to people on Instant Messenger for some strange reason. And then the last album I want to mention is the Gorillaz self-titled album. I still think a cartoon band is like the coolest idea ever conceived. I don't know why there aren't more out there, but I just love their first album so much. Like anytime Clint Eastwood comes up, it's a total jam. Like I'm dancing. So I highly recommend these albums. Please give them a listen. I haven't even touched on all the amazing movies that came out. I could probably talk about movies from this era for literal hours. My favorite movie of all time happens to be from like 2001, and it's Amelie. Anytime anybody asks like what my favorite movie is, it's always Amelie. It's like such a magical movie. I think after that, it's probably The Matrix or something like that, just because I know I saw The Matrix like 50 times with my sister. I was in love with Keanu Reeves. I still love him now. I can't believe he's almost 60 now, which is like, it's just crazy. Where has the time gone, you guys? Where has the time gone? I honestly think that the early 2000s was a pretty great time to be a teenager. I wouldn't trade it for anything else. So many interesting things were happening during this time. The music was great. You know, I was learning how to use the internet, which was like a social lifeline for me. I didn't drive until I was like 21, you know, and I lived like 30 minutes from most of my friends in high school, so I was mostly like at home. I didn't get to hang out that much. So AOL Instant Messenger was like so key. It was so important for me to keep in touch with like my friends outside of school. It's how I talked to my boyfriend. You know, we also did like LiveJournal, which was great because it was a space for everybody to vent about their lives and write these like incredibly emo journal entries about, I don't know, like breakups and parents and like just general life drama. Nowadays people just write like maybe a sentence or two on Twitter or whatever, but back then we would like write these entire like multi-page sagas about our lives and just post it on the internet. It was just wild. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video so far, and watching me stumble through this marker illustration. One thing I'm really noticing as I'm watching this footage over again is just like, it's driving me a little bit crazy that my initial sketches were kind of lost when I put the pink on top, and especially after I put the acrylic marker on top of that. I was basically just making stuff up as I went. But yeah, I should have taken a photo of the sketch for future reference, but I didn't think about that during the process. But oh well. Next time though, I'll remember next time. But yeah, I think my plan for these illustrations is to scan them and like add them to my Etsy shop. I sell digital clip art on there, so I think these would be such a great addition to the shop. I already have some 90s inspired clip art, so I think Y2K stuff would be a really fun thing to add. But yeah, if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for listening to me ramble about nostalgic stuff from my formative years. I hope you found it at least somewhat entertaining. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.